It was past midnight in New Orleans. The rain hammered against my window when I heard the pounding on my door. At first I thought it was just thunder, until I heard his voice. "Open up, Sarah. You can't hide from me." My stepfather Jacob was standing outside my apartment, drunk, furious, his fists slamming so hard the frame shook. And behind him I saw my mother's face, frozen with terror, her eyes begging for help, but her body paralyzed with fear. When I refused to open, he roared, "If you try to take her from me, I'll kill you both tonight." Then the lock splintered and everything I thought was safe came crashing down. My name is Sarah Miller. I'm 31 now, but 7 years ago on my 24th birthday, my life changed forever. That night became the dividing line between who I used to be and who I was forced to become. Before I tell you how this nightmare unfolded and how it shaped the person I am today, let me know where you're watching from. And if stories about resilience, survival, and family secrets resonate with you, make sure you subscribe so you never miss what's coming next. Because trust me, you will want to hear the truth behind what happened that night and how it nearly destroyed us. But before that night, before the terror, there was once a time when life felt almost perfect. I grew up in Dallas, Texas, in a small brick house on a quiet street where everyone knew each other. My father, Michael, was my hero. He worked long hours as a mechanic, but no matter how tired he was, he always had energy left for me. He taught me how to ride my bike in the cul-de-sac, grilled burgers every Saturday, and never missed a single school play. My mother, Diane, and I were his world, and I knew it. But everything changed when I was just 9 years old. One evening, Dad collapsed in our kitchen. Aggressive heart disease stole him from us faster than I could understand. I remember standing in that hospital room holding my mom's trembling hand, watching the monitors go flat. That night, my childhood innocence ended. For the next few years, it was just Mom and me. She worked 2 jobs, waitressing during the day and stocking shelves at night, just to keep the lights on. We didn't have much, but we had each other. Friday nights meant popcorn and old movies. Sunday mornings we baked pancakes even if the fridge was nearly empty. Those years were hard, but they were ours. And I clung to them like lifelines. Then when I was 12, Jacob entered our lives. He was the branch manager at the local bank where Mom had just started working as a teller. He seemed polished, successful, the kind of man who could finally give my mother the security she longed for. I still remember the first night he came over for dinner. He wore a crisp navy suit, carried roses for Mom, and brought me a thick book about astronomy because she told him I loved the stars. He laughed at my jokes, asked me about school, and looked at my mother with the kind of attention she hadn't seen in years. To a grieving 12-year-old, he seemed almost perfect. But sometimes perfection is just a mask. And behind Jacob's mask was something darker than I could ever imagine. At first, life with Jacob felt like an upgrade. He moved us into his spacious 2-story home in an upscale Dallas neighborhood. I had my own room, a shiny new computer, even a bookshelf filled with novels I'd always wanted to read. For a little while I believed maybe my mom had finally found happiness again. But slowly Jacob's charm began to twist into something else. It started with money. He insisted on handling all the finances, convincing Mom to close her personal account and merge everything into his. "It's more efficient," he explained with that calm, logical tone. "We'll save on fees. We're a family now." And Mom, so desperate to believe in this new stability, agreed. Then came her friends. Karen was too gossipy. Susan was a bad influence. Jennifer spent too recklessly and would drag Mom down with her. One by one, Jacob found reasons to disapprove of every single friend Mom had. Soon the phone calls slowed, and then stopped completely. I watched my mother shrink before my eyes. The woman who once sang along to country songs while cooking now moved silently around the kitchen. She stopped wearing her favorite red lipstick. Jacob said it looked cheap. Her bright clothes disappeared, replaced with conservative outfits he approved. At 14, I saw Jacob's temper for the first time. Mom had bought a simple sundress for a work picnic without asking him. It wasn't expensive, but when he saw it, his face turned red. He slammed his dinner plate against the wall, spaghetti sauce dripping down the cream wallpaper like blood. He screamed that she was irresponsible, reckless, ungrateful. Mom apologized over and over, returned the dress the next morning, and never shopped alone again. That night, I lay awake in my room, heart pounding, realizing the truth. Jacob didn't just want to be part of our family, he wanted to control it, to own it. And he was succeeding piece by piece. The house looked perfect from the outside. but inside the walls were closing in. By the time I turned 15, Jacob's anger was no longer just words or broken dishes. One night I walked into the kitchen and saw him shove my mother so hard she slammed against the counter. She tried to laugh it off, holding her wrist and saying it was an accident. But I saw the fear in her eyes, the way she avoided my gaze. Another time I heard shouting from their bedroom. When I opened the door, Jacob spun around, his hand still raised, while Mom scrambled to cover a bruise forming on her cheek. "I tripped," she whispered, her voice shaking. But I knew better. I begged her to leave him. I promised we could figure it out together. But she just shook her head, tears brimming. "You don't understand adult relationships," she whispered. "He takes care of us. We're lucky to have him." Her words cut deeper than any of Jacob's insults. Because in that moment I realized she wasn't just trapped, she believed she deserved to be. So I started building walls of my own. I joined every after-school club I could find, debate, yearbook, theater, anything to keep me away from home. On weekends I slept at friends' houses, pretending it was for fun, when really I just couldn't stand the silence of Jacob's perfect house. At home I became a ghost. I ate dinner quietly, stayed in my room with the door locked, and spoke only when absolutely necessary. Jacob didn't stop me. If anything, he seemed relieved when I disappeared. As long as Mom obeyed, I didn't matter to him. But the hardest part wasn't Jacob, it was my mother. The woman who used to be my best friend, my safe place, now felt like a stranger standing on the other side of a wall I couldn't break down. We lived under the same roof but in two completely different worlds. And every day I felt us drifting further apart, while Jacob's shadow grew larger over both of us. By the time I turned 16, I knew I couldn't save my mother. She was drowning, and every time I reached for her, she pushed me away, insisting she was fine while Jacob's grip around her throat grew tighter. So I made a decision. If I couldn't free her, I would free myself. Late at night, after homework was done and the house had gone silent, I'd sit cross-legged on my bed with my laptop glow lighting my face. I scoured websites for scholarships, colleges, any opportunity that could carry me far away from Dallas, far away from Jacob. Every brochure I printed out, I hid beneath the floorboard under my bed. Every dollar I earned shelving books at the local library went into a shoebox taped beneath my desk. It wasn't much, but it was mine, untouched by Jacob's control. School became my lifeline. While other kids rolled their eyes at exams, I clung to every achievement like it was a rung on the ladder out of that house. Teachers praised me, friends envied me, but no one knew the truth. My grades weren't ambition. They were survival. And yet, every night before I fell asleep I would hear them. The muffled arguments through the thin walls. My mother's hushed apologies. The sound of a door slamming, followed by silence so heavy it pressed against my chest like stone. Sometimes I'd stare at the glow-in-the-dark stars stuck to my ceiling, the ones Dad had bought me years before, and whisper, "I'll get out, I promise." But deep down I knew leaving meant abandoning her to him. And that guilt was the one chain Jacob never even had to lock around me. I carried it willingly. The night before I left for college, the house felt wrong. The air was heavy, like the walls themselves knew I was about to escape. My suitcases sat neatly packed by the door, their presence like a silent rebellion against 12 years of Jacob's rule. That evening, long after Jacob had gone to bed, Mom slipped quietly into my room. The hallway light framed her like a shadow, and for a moment, I thought she might vanish if I blinked. She sat on the edge of my bed just like she did when I was little, her hand smoothing over my blanket as though searching for a version of me she had already lost. "I'm proud of you," she whispered, her voice thin and trembling. "You're going to do amazing things, Sarah." Her eyes glistened, and in them I saw not just pride but longing, like she wanted to step into my suitcase and disappear with me. "Come with me," I blurted out, almost childlike. "We'll find an apartment in Chicago. You can start over. We can start over." For a heartbeat, her face softened, and I thought she might say yes. But then the resignation I had come to hate washed over her features like a curtain dropping on a stage. She shook her head slowly. "This is my life now," she murmured. "But it doesn't have to be yours. Promise me you'll build something better." Her words splintered me into pieces, half of me aching to run, half of me shackled to the image of her staying behind. When she finally left my room, I sat in the dark, staring at the faint glow of the streetlight outside my window, knowing that sometimes survival meant walking away, even if it felt like betrayal. The next morning, Jacob drove us to the university. The ride was suffocating, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, his jaw clenched in silence. Mom sat beside him, staring out the window as if the world passing by could swallow her whole. When we pulled up to the dorms, Jacob played his role flawlessly. He carried my boxes, shook hands with my new roommate's parents, and smiled like a man who had nothing to hide. Anyone watching would have thought he was the perfect stepfather, proud and supportive. But when the others weren't looking, his eyes found mine. Piercing. A silent warning carved deep into my chest. It was as if he was saying, "Run as far as you want, Sarah. You'll never really escape me." And for the first time in years I realized, maybe he was right. College felt like sunlight after years in a cave. When my mother and Jacob drove away that morning, I stood in my dorm room surrounded by unpacked boxes and mismatched furniture. But for the first time in years I could breathe. The air didn't taste like fear. I threw myself into classes, studying psychology with an intensity my professors noticed right away. To me, every lecture, every textbook wasn't just theory, it was a search for answers. Why had my mother stayed? Why did men like Jacob need to break others down to feel whole? And could people like me ever truly heal? I made friends, real friends who didn't know anything about the shadows I came from. Movie nights in the dorm lounge, late-night pizza runs, debates about politics and philosophy. I laughed more in those first months than I had in years. And then there was Daniel. We met in abnormal psychology class. He had this quiet confidence, the kind that didn't need to fill the silence with noise. He noticed when I flinched at certain topics but never pushed, never pried. Slowly I began to trust him, revealing pieces of my past like broken glass I was afraid to hand over. But Daniel didn't cut himself on my sharp edges. He held them carefully, patiently. With him I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Safe. Yet no matter how bright my days became, Jacob was still there. He haunted me in the shadows, his voice replaying in my head whenever I second-guessed myself. His stare, cold and unblinking, would flash in my memory during exams, or when I hesitated before opening a door at night. Sometimes I'd wake from dreams so vivid I could still feel his hand gripping my arm, dragging me back into that Dallas house. Even my phone calls home were tainted. Mom's voice always careful, always clipped. She never said much about Jacob. "Everything's fine, sweetie," she would insist. But the pauses between her words told me otherwise. I tried visiting once during freshman year. The moment I stepped inside that house again, the air felt heavy, suffocating. Jacob smiled, acted polite, but his eyes told another story. A story that said, "Don't forget, Sarah. I still own this family." After that, I found excuses not to go home. Holidays, I stayed on campus. Summer breaks, I signed up for extra classes or took part-time jobs. Anything to avoid walking back into that prison disguised as a house. But no matter how far I ran, the truth lingered. Jacob might not be in my daily life anymore, but he was still in hers. And as long as my mother stayed, I knew one day somehow his shadow would reach for me again. It was during my junior year when I noticed it. Mom appeared on a video call one Sunday afternoon. At first she smiled the same tight smile she always used. But then she shifted the camera too quickly, and for a brief second I saw it, yellow and purple fading beneath her eye. My stomach dropped. "Mom, what happened?" She fumbled, adjusted the webcam, her hand brushing against her cheek like she could wipe the bruise away. "Oh, I tripped on the stairs while carrying laundry." Her voice was light, too light. But her eyes, darting sideways, searching the shadows, told a different story. "Mom," I said softly, "you can tell me anything. You know that, right?" Her smile froze. "Everything is fine, sweetie. How's your new project at school?" She switched the subject so quickly it left me cold. After we hung up, I sat in the silence of my dorm, my hands trembling, anger and helplessness burning through me. Jacob was hurting her, and she was still protecting him. I began calling her at different times of day, hoping to catch her when Jacob wasn't around. Sometimes she answered, her voice hushed, like she was afraid he might hear through the walls. Other times it went straight to voicemail. The distance was unbearable. I reached out to Catherine, one of my professors who specialized in domestic violence cases. I didn't give names, but I asked, "How do you help someone who doesn't think they can leave?" Her answer chilled me. "The most dangerous time is when a victim tries to leave. That's when abusers become desperate, when control slips through their fingers. If your mother ever decides to go, she needs a plan, a safe plan. So I started building one. Between classes and shifts at the library, I researched shelters near Dallas. I saved hotline numbers, legal aid contacts, even addresses hidden away in a password-protected folder. I wrote out steps. Pack a bag with essentials, hide it somewhere safe, leave when Jacob was at work. I mailed her a brochure for a women's center tucked inside a birthday card. A small risk, but one I hoped might plant a seed. Weeks passed. Then one night my phone rang. It was Mom. Her voice shook so violently I could barely understand her words. "He found it," she whispered. "The brochure." He went through my purse. I pressed the phone harder to my ear, my pulse racing. "Mom, listen to me. Pack a small bag. Just essentials. I'll send you a car to the bus station. You can come here. You'll be safe with me." She sobbed softly, trying to keep quiet. "I can't just leave. The house, my job. What would people think?" "None of that matters if you're not alive to have it," I whispered fiercely. "Please, Mom. Please." There was a pause so long I thought the line had gone dead. Then finally, "Maybe you're right," she said, her voice fragile as glass. "Let me think about it. I'll call you tomorrow when he's at work." When the call ended, I stared at my phone, shaking, praying tomorrow would come. But deep down, I knew tomorrow might never arrive. The next day I barely touched my food. Every vibration of my phone sent my heart racing. By evening I couldn't take it anymore. Called Mom. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. And again. Nothing. Hours later, just as I was about to dial the local police, my phone finally lit up. Her voice was unusually bright. Too bright. "Hi, sweetheart. Everything's fine now. Frank and I," she cut herself off, then corrected, "Jacob and I had a really good talk. We're going to start marriage counseling." Every word tasted like poison. I could hear the lie in her tone, the stiffness in her laugh. My stomach clenched. "Mom, are you sure? You don't sound." "Absolutely sure," she interrupted, her voice sharp. Then softer. "Oh? Jacob wants to say hello." Before I could respond, his voice filled my ear. Smooth. Calm. Controlled. "Sarah. How nice to hear you've been keeping in touch with your mother. I hope you're not filling her head with nonsense." My throat went dry. "I just want her to be safe. That's all." "She is both safe and happy with me," he said evenly. But beneath that calm tone I heard it, the threat. The unspoken warning. "Perhaps you should focus on your own life instead of interfering in ours. Family is sacred, Sarah. Remember that." And then, the line went dead. I sat frozen on the edge of my bed, the phone still pressed to my ear long after the call ended. The room felt smaller, the walls pressing in, like Jacob's shadow had seeped all the way from Dallas into my tiny Chicago apartment. For days I tried reaching Mom again. Calls went unanswered. The few texts I received were painfully generic. Updates about the garden, the weather, community events. Words written under surveillance, every sentence stripped of truth. By the time October rolled around, an icy dread had taken root in my chest. My 24th birthday was coming. Friends planned dinners. Daniel promised a celebration the night after. But as the date crept closer, I couldn't shake the feeling that Jacob was planning something too. Something far darker. October 23rd. My 24th birthday. The city outside my window was calm. Rain glistening on the pavement, streetlights flickering like sleepy candles. My friends had texted me birthday wishes. Daniel promised dinner the next night. I curled up in pajamas with a novel and leftover Thai food, convinced the worst was behind me. Then, bang, bang, bang. The pounding shook my door like a war drum. I jolted upright, heart racing. "Open the door, Sarah." That voice. Slurred, venomous. I crept to the peephole. His face was red with alcohol and rage, eyes wild. And just behind him, Mom. Her body small, hands clasped to her chest, her eyes wide with terror. She didn't move. She didn't speak. She was frozen. "Go away." I shouted, trying to steady my voice as I reached for my phone. "It's after midnight. If you don't leave, I'm calling the police." His laugh was grotesque. "We came to wish you happy birthday. Don't be rude to your family." Then his smile collapsed into fury. "You ungrateful little bitch." He rammed his shoulder into the door. Once. Twice. Wood splintered. On the third hit, the lock gave way with a violent crack. The door flew open. Suddenly he was inside. The smell of whiskey filled the air as he lunged at me. My phone slipped from my hand, clattering across the floor. His fist crashed into my cheek. Stars exploded in my vision. My head hit the wall. Pain shot through me like fire. "Mom, help me!" I screamed, reaching out, eyes locking with hers. She stood in the doorway, paralyzed, tears streaking her face, but she didn't move. Didn't save me. Jacob yanked me by the hair, slammed me against the plaster so hard the wall cracked. His breath was hot against my ear. "This is what happens when you try to destroy a family," he hissed. "This is what you deserve." He twisted my arm behind my back. A scream ripped from my throat as white-hot pain burst through my shoulder. I collapsed, gasping, my ribs already throbbing from his blows. My vision blurred, but I saw it. My phone inches away. With every ounce of strength left, I clawed forward, my fingertips brushing the emergency SOS button I had programmed. 3 quick presses. Location sent. Jacob's boot crashed into my side. Ribs cracked. Blood filled my mouth. The world dimmed. And through the haze, the last thing I saw was my mother's face. Her lips moving soundlessly. Her hands trembling. Her body still frozen. And then sirens. Faint. Distant. Growing louder. Darkness swallowed me whole. The steady beeping of a heart monitor pulled me out of the darkness. At first I didn't know where I was. The ceiling above me was blinding white, fluorescent lights buzzing faintly like distant bees. My entire body screamed in pain. My ribs, my cheek, my shoulder wrapped tightly in bandages. Then I felt it, a warm hand gripping mine. I turned my head slowly. Daniel sat beside me, his face pale, eyes bloodshot, like he hadn't slept in days. When he saw my eyes flutter open, relief poured across his features. "Sarah," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Thank God you're awake." My throat was raw, but I managed to rasp. "Jacob?" His jaw tightened. "He's in custody. The police arrested him at your apartment. They have more than enough evidence this time. He's not getting out." I closed my eyes, a single tear slipping down my temple. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to believe that Jacob's grip might finally be broken. A knock on the door interrupted the fragile silence. When it opened, I froze. It was Mom. She looked smaller. Her face was pale, makeup smeared from crying. She stood hesitantly in the doorway, clutching her purse to her chest like a shield. "Can I come in?" she whispered. Daniel glanced at me. I nodded faintly. He gave my hand a squeeze before stepping out, leaving us alone. Mom shuffled to the chair beside me, her eyes darting across my bruises, the sling holding my shoulder, the 4 in my arm. Her lips trembled, and for a long moment she couldn't speak. Finally, her voice broke into a whisper. "I'm so sorry, Sarah." The words pierced me deeper than Jacob's fists ever had. She covered her mouth with her hands, sobbing. "I thought if I stayed, if I obeyed, he would leave you alone. Thought I was protecting you. But I failed. I failed you in the worst way a mother can." I stared at her, torn between anger and pity. All the years I had begged her to see the truth. All the nights I had cried alone because she chose him over me. And now, here she was, shattered. "How long?" I asked, my voice barely audible. She swallowed hard. "Since the first year we married. At first it was shouting, breaking things. Then, pushing. Slaps. Later worse. He always promised it would be the last time. He told me if I ever left, he would kill me. Kill you." Her words cracked, broken pieces of a nightmare I had only guessed at. "I stayed because I thought it was the only way to keep you safe. Penny. I couldn't even do that." Tears blurred my vision, but this time they weren't just for me. They were for her too, for the years she lived as a prisoner in her own home, for the pieces of herself Jacob had stolen. "Mom," I whispered, my voice shaking. "He's gone now. You don't have to live in his shadow anymore. Neither of us do." She reached out, her hand trembling as it hovered above mine, then finally settled there, fragile but real. For the first time in years we sat in silence. Not as strangers divided by fear, but as survivors bound by it. And somewhere deep inside, I felt the faintest flicker of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. 3 months later, I stood at the foot of the Dallas County Courthouse, the granite columns towering over me like silent judges. My shoulder was healed enough that I no longer wore the sling, though every step up those broad stone stairs made my ribs ache with memory. Inside, the courtroom smelled of polished wood and tension. Jacob sat at the defense table dressed in a tailored navy suit, his silver hair combed back neatly. To anyone else he looked like a respectable man, maybe even a business executive. But to me he was still the monster who had splintered my door and twisted my arm until it broke. His eyes found mine across the room, cold, defiant, daring me to flinch. But I didn't. Not this time. The prosecutor, Maria Delgado, began with a steady voice. This case is about control. Years of manipulation, isolation, and violence culminating in one terrifying night. She walked the jury through the police photos of my shattered door, the blood on the wall, the medical reports detailing my broken bones. Then it was my turn. As I stepped onto the witness stand, my palms damp, I swore to tell the truth. The courtroom blurred for a moment, but then I locked eyes with the jury and forced myself to speak. I told them about the charm Jacob had used to reel us in, the financial control, the isolation, the insults. I told them about the bruise I saw on my mother's cheek when I was 16, about the suffocating silence in that house, about the years of fear that grew like vines around our throats. And finally I told them about October 23rd. The pounding on my door, his voice like thunder, the moment the lock broke, the blows that sent me to the floor. My voice cracked, but I didn't stop. I described every strike, every scream, every second I thought I might die. When the defense attorney rose, he tried to twist my words. Isn't it true, Miss Miller, that you resented your stepfather for marrying your mother? I steadied my breath. I resented him for destroying her. For destroying us. Then it was Mom's turn. She trembled at first, her hands twisting in her lap. But as she spoke, her voice grew stronger. She described 12 years of control. Jacob dictating her clothes, her friends, her money. The bruises, the threats, the nights she thought she wouldn't survive. The defense tried to paint her as unstable, but Mom held steady. If I was unstable, she said, her voice firm, it was because he made me that way. The jury flinched when the emergency call recording was played. My screams filled the courtroom. Jacob's slurred threats echoed against the walls. The room went utterly still, the weight of truth undeniable. Days stretched into a week. Then came the verdict. We stood as the foreman read. On the charge of breaking and entering, guilty. On the charge of assault and battery with intent to cause grievous harm, guilty. Relief crashed over me so hard my knees nearly buckled. Mom gripped my hand, tears streaming silently down her face. Jacob's composure cracked for the first time. His jaw clenched, his eyes narrowed with pure hatred as deputies closed in. He hissed something under his breath, but this time it didn't matter. His voice no longer held power. 2 weeks later, the judge delivered the sentence. 15 years in state prison. 15 years of silence where his threats could not reach us. As they led him away in handcuffs, I felt something I hadn't felt since I was 9 years old. Like the air had cleared, like I could finally stand tall without his shadow pressing me down. It wasn't the end of the story. Healing would take longer. But for the first time the cage was gone. And the door was open. 2 years after the trial, I stood in front of a small audience in a community room in Chicago. The room wasn't glamorous. Just folding chairs, a pot of coffee on a plastic table, sunlight spilling through tall windows. But to me it was everything. Because this was the very first meeting of the Haven Center, the nonprofit I had founded for survivors of domestic abuse. As I looked around, I saw faces that mirrored pieces of my own journey. Women with fresh bruises hidden beneath scarves, men with haunted eyes, teenagers clutching notebooks as if the words inside might save them. Survivors, all of them. My name is Sarah Miller, I began, my voice steady. 2 years ago I lay in a hospital bed, broken and terrified. Today I stand here because pain didn't get the last word. Healing did. I told them what I had learned, that trauma doesn't vanish. It reshapes you. That scars don't disappear, but they don't define you either. I spoke about the nights of nightmares, the mornings when breathing felt like climbing a mountain. And then I spoke about hope, the way healing begins when you're finally believed, finally safe, finally free. Mom sat in the front row. She looked different now. Stronger. Her hair was streaked with silver, but she wore it proudly. Her lipstick was bright red again, the same shade she had once abandoned because Jacob hated it. She had moved into her own apartment near mine, found a part-time job at a bookstore, joined a book club, even started gardening on her balcony. For the first time in decades, she was living a life that was hers. When I finished speaking, the room filled with quiet applause. Some people cried. Some smiled through tears. And in that moment, I realized something profound. Healing wasn't just about me or my mother. It was about every person who chose to step out of silence and reclaim their voice. Later that night at home, Daniel raised a toast at our kitchen table. To survival, he said. I shook my head gently, raising my own glass. To more than survival. To freedom. To love. To starting over. Because here's the truth I want you to remember. Light bulb pain will change you, but it doesn't have to destroy you. Light bulb, you cannot save someone who isn't ready, but you can keep the light on for when they are. Light bulb family isn't defined by fear or control. It's defined by love, safety, and choice. So if you're listening to this and you see shadows in your own life, know this: healing is always possible. You are never truly alone. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is to take that first step out of the darkness, even if your hands are still shaking.